Right.
Okay, good morning. Today is May 8th, 2024, 9 o'clock, more or less. And this is meeting 10 Natural Resources and Energy. We're here to go over the House's proposal amendment to S213, the Flood Safety Act. And Mr. Brady, if you could please walk us through their changes, that would be helpful.
Sure. So I thought the work I'd be able to tell. So you should have the House proposal amendment on your website, which is there. And the first instance of amendment is a clarifying amendment. It is in the requirement in section 3 that DEC conduct infill mapping of the river corridors, and it just directs DEC to consult with the Agency of Commerce and Community Development and RPCs in the completion of that mapping.
And my guess is that was to help pick it up with what's going on in 687.
I think that was partially the intent. I think it was also partially the intent that, these are the entities that will be have a significant interest in what development will be allowed in these infill maps.
Any questions? Just speak up as we go. Okay. Mayor Watson, you can hear us okay?
I can hear you okay, and that's just fine.
Nice.
The second and third instances of amendment are conforming amendments. As you recall, you are shifting the permitting of development in river corridor protection areas from municipal authority to A&R permitting authority beginning in 2028. Some of the land use planners that you all know pointed out there were a couple of conforming sections that are the changes that need to be made in municipal zoning authority, section 6A there on page 1, line 12. That's in the long list of municipal ordinance authority, so their ability to adopt an ordinance for river corridor protection would be struck. In the third instance of amendment going on to page 2, this is
So page 1, Mr. Chair, we're the House would have us use terms commonly used in Mississippi Valley to instead of terms used here in Vermont dealing with heavy rain that's and there's a disconformity. The federal failure to distinguish between the two.
Are we kind of moving away from flood river, river corridor protection area? Is that what you're?
Well, no, in talking is not referring to fluvial erosion, which is what often tends to be the what washes people seems away, opposed to covering it with water and gradually receding, like they do out west.
well, flood hazard areas are the FEMA terms used for compliance with the NFIP program.
Thank you. So we're complying with, we're trying to remember.
Right, so the FEMA program is
Federal failure to make such a distinction.
so moving on page 2. In the second instance of amendment, these are again conforming amendments related to municipal authority. 24 VSA 4413 are the limitations on municipal bylaws. It's kind of there are limitations in the section, but it also says what they can regulate, and so you're striking that they can regulate river corridors. Same in section 8B on line 9 on page 2. These are the zoning for municipal types of regulation. They'll still have buffer authority, but they won't have river corridor authority. So moving on. Page 3, line 5, fourth instance of amendment. This is amending one of the sections in the wetland section. You will remember that you had a discussion about what was an allowed use under the wetlands rules or what was an exemption under the wetlands rules, and it was regarding dam removal projects, river corridor restoration projects, etc. And then there was a subsequent request from the utilities that utility pole location be a allowed use. And so what the House did, instead of actually putting those in as allowed uses or exemptions, they have page 3, line 7, they added a new section that would direct the agency during the rulemaking that's required in 213 to review whether to authorize the following activities as allowed uses: relocation of utility lines and poles adjacent to roadsides, and temporary access to wetland rivers and flood restoration projects that are currently allowed under the rules, provided that the commissioner shall allow temporary access to wetlands as an allowed use for wetlands, river, and flood restoration projects conducted or initiated prior to January 1, 2025. And so there were already projects that had been identified that could go into place before the rulemaking.
Yeah.
And so the House said temporary access to those projects through a wetland is an allowed use until those rules are adopted.
And then the question of whether allowed uses at temporary, all that stuff will get sorted out by the rule itself.
Yes. On page 3, 6 instance of amendment, going over page 4. This is a new section. I don't believe the Senate has seen this before. There is currently in statute a requirement that wastewater treatment plants in Vermont shall discharge at a phosphorus concentration of 0.80 milligrams per liter on a monthly average basis. There are existing exceptions to that.
Up to then.
No, you have to, or yes, they can discharge up to that amount.
Okay.
And there are exceptions to that that would allow plants to discharge over that. There is one wastewater treatment plant, it's in Shoreham. It uses what is called recirculating sand filter technology that Shoreham implemented on a pilot project basis with A&R's approval in the early 2000s. Their permit, their NIFTY's, FIFTY's permit, whatever you want to, has just come up in the past 2 years for renewal. And the new 0.8 standard is being applied to them. Now, the 0.8 standard and statute was actually enacted like in the early 80s. But at that time, it had a subsection in it that said wastewater treatment plants are not required to meet 0.8 unless the funding is made available for them and as the Secretary of Natural Resources schedules that. In 2015, 2016, locally known as the State Clean Water Act, Act 64, you remove that subsection that said that the state was going to, they didn't have to meet 0.8 until the state paid for it. And subject to an A&R schedule. So that meant as each plant came up for renewal, they had to meet 0.8. And so Shoreham's permit came up for renewal 2+ years ago. They were required to meet 0.8. In order to meet 0.8, they have to implement about, I think it's $900,000 to $1 million worth of technology for, I think, an $80,000 a year wastewater treatment budget. And when you look at the TMDL for what has been allocated in that sub-watershed was actually meeting its waste load allocations. And so EPA didn't require the waste load allocations for the treatment plants in that sub-watershed to change. And so they're well below their phosphorus tonnage that's being discharged, but they're not meeting their concentration. So what is proposed by the House is that there be an additional exception added to the 0.8 discharge standard for wastewater treatment plants for those discharges of less than 35,000 gallons per day, and that's the maximum that Shoreham can do. They're not doing that, but that's the maximum that they could do. from a municipally owned secondary sewage treatment plant using recirculating sand filters in the Lake Champlain drainage basin. They are the only one permitted on or before July 1, 2001, unless the plant is modified to use technology other than recirculating sand filters.
So the tonnage, I'm familiar with the concentration. Of whatever way of looking at what's coming out of the plant. Of the tonnage, are those figures out of the TMDL?
Well, this is the TMDL.
Yeah.
And this is the tonnage authorization, as well as everything, it's the concentrations, design flow, waste load allocation. And so they're it's in metric tons, it's in 0.242 metric tons per year. Which, you know, when compared to say Rutland, which is 5.634. Middlebury 1.82. Williamstown is 1.0. Oh, Williamstown. You know, that's the comparison.
Okay, so they're within the TMDL
Yes.
and, but
Because other towns feel well enough to keep. As an aggregate to be within the
Well,
TMDL.
that is exactly what EPA said in the TMDL. That given the minor contribution of small facilities, EPA determined that further reductions would have negligible impact. Thus, they were given the same allocations as in the 2002 TMDL. EPA next considered the range of phosphorus concentration limits that are achieved in practices at fill facilities throughout New England. The phosphorus discharge limit of 0.10 is currently considered represent a discharge. So they go on to basically say that it doesn't really need to be met in these sub-watersheds. That they're already well below their waste load allocation. And that they're not going to change the waste load allocation.
so the document you're reading from is,
It's the EPA TMDL for election.
is there anybody doing a question?
Yeah, so this is obviously a totally new concept to me, like I mean, I generally know different pieces of it with the filtration system. What I think I'm understanding, and please tell me if I'm wrong, is that they would have to spend a significant amount of money to meet the new threshold. They would basically have to create a new system in this one specific area.
It wouldn't be a new system, it would be new technology at their treatment plant.
Okay.
Would cost,
And
it would cost about $1 million.
okay, and the actual impact, like the reason we don't want that amount of phosphorus in the water is because I'm assuming the algae blooms probably have something to do with that, but other factors are affected. So are we allowing for more unbalancing chemicals to be?
No, I don't think they're gonna change the tonnage, they're just gonna change the concentration.
And the concentration, to your point, matters, why?
Well, the concentration is effectively a surrogate for the amount discharged, but it's not really a surrogate, it's a standard that to be achieved so that the amount discharged meets the waste load allocation levels. But if they're not, they're already meeting their waste load allocation levels. The standard. And they probably will never, well, it's gonna be a while, the significant development. Sure, I don't know if there's possibilities of significant development. To get to a point where they would need that concentration in order to control.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
So,
So it's kind of like we'd be making them scale way up to meet something that probably.
it's theoretically already way off, and. Frankly, you're gonna be dealing with issues like this because Act 64 was one size fits all. and some of the statutory changes were the same. But when you're now going around the state to looking at some of the individual issues, one size fits all doesn't fit all. I know my head is way bigger than one size. And so. So that is like, you're gonna have that issue,
That's not.
right? It's gonna be. It's gonna be an issue.
And I should have said before, but the language has been because. Former Representative Will Stephen reached out and said, who lives in Shoreham? Yes, help facilitate, behalf of the town. Addressing this issue with going into a permit. Was it? Was it, the whole thing sort of brought to light because it was time to renew their permit?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, so you would think that with NIMT's permits every 5 years. That we would have gotten to this before 2014 after Act 64 in 2015, but it's just the way that some of the permitting cycles work. And it's just, they were up for renewal in 2022, 23, and that's when it did.
Well, thank you. It seems, from my understanding of this amendment, albeit brand new concept to me, that this makes sense. And it doesn't seem to have a major environmental negative impact. But
Sure.
I'm happy to be told otherwise.
Sarah Watson?
Thank you. I just want to say out loud that I feel like this is going to be a worthwhile conversation to have, as you mentioned, in the future. I mean, I remember even from my days of mayoring that, you know, with every sort of increase in requirements, or I should say, the lower the concentration standards required, the increment further and further down required more and more money to implement. And there's, at some point, it could be unrealistic.
Right, and that's a return to scale issue as well, and that was just something that A&R, from my recollection, has been emphasizing for years. It's like, should we really be putting all of our money into the wastewater treatment plants to try to achieve
Right.
0.1 or 0.3
Right.
when you might be able to achieve better phosphorus reduction with these watersheds throughout?
Right, if it's a non-point discharge, I mean, like, how do we, there may be other places to concentrate it.
I mean, I think since Act 64, been a lot of Veronica, all right, but all I need was ag as it was the cost per unit, unit of phosphorus reduced in wastewater treatment facility compared to changing farm practices was tenfold or 100-fold. It was like way cheaper to go use phosphorus out in a field than it was change the treatment facility.
I guess I want to acknowledge the non-linear relationship between ratcheting down from the expense.
This commissioner or Ms. Smith, does AR have anything you want to chip in on this part of the amendment? Like it's a AR support with the proposed language.
A&R didn't request, this is Hannah Smith, who's not here. We didn't propose the language, but we have no objection.
I know it was drafted, I had sent it off to Secretary Moore. Okay, any other questions on this? Alright. So is it your guess that we're doing this control now, but we may see more of these next year after?
Well, I think you're really gonna see the issues in the Connecticut River when
And the NDLs are
the
set.
TMDL comes into place for nitrogen. Do you need things like the 3-acre permit in Connecticut River Valley just for phosphorus, not nitrogen? At that cost. When you're not achieving anything under a TMDL.
Right.
Like things like that, I think you're gonna have to have discussions about.
Thank you very much. Any other concern?
Is how different is protecting waters from nitrogen as opposed to phosphorus?
Well, you've done a ton of stuff already to protect the waters of Vermont from nitrogen. There's no nitrogen in residential fertilizer allowed. You have a nitrogen standard under your wastewater treatment plants. It's pretty good. All of the ag farms have to have a nutrient management plan that accounts for all the nitrogen that's supplied. And nitrogen usually isn't the chemical at issue on farms, it's usually phosphorus. I don't know what you're gonna do.
Yes. What I'm wondering, what are the different properties of nitrogen as opposed to the properties
No,
phosphorus
I
that require different
I'm
responses?
unqualified to.
Okay.
Okay, there are no more questions on that section. A little more to go through.
So yeah, on the page 5 in the 7th instance of amendment. In 2002 in Capitol Bill, there was a directive for A&R to evaluate and analyze the capital and ongoing maintenance costs of the Green River Dam. I believe this is in some contemplation of at one point the state taking over the dam, its ownership. But the 2022 Act did not actually have an end date by which A&R would complete the analysis of those costs. This adds to the transition section for dams, a requirement that A&R complete that analysis by January 15, 2025.
The old goes back to the previous owner.
So this does not change ownership. I believe there are people that would like the ownership to happen, the ownership change to happen, but I don't know what the agency's position is, and I don't know where they are in completion of the analysis.
For the time being, it's still owned by Lincoln Water, more so Lincoln Water.
It's interesting, right? Don't blame us, it's state's taking care of it.
Right,
Well, I think the state would have to do an analysis of any cost of its assumption of ownership of a dam. And to be quite frank, the capital bill language in 2022 doesn't mention ownership. It just says assess the costs to run it and maintain it. But it doesn't say anything about whether or not the state would take ownership or recommend whether the state would take ownership. So this is really just an analysis of cost. Be up to you at some future date. Determine if you want to take ownership, but right now this language doesn't address that.
I mean, it's interpreted what you said.
You know, I did mention ownership, but the language actually doesn't reference it.
this the piece of dam that is a federal 401
Yes.
analysis that basically stop altering stream flow quite so much. We can't impound and release the way we used to, and
The FERC license came up for renewal and under the 401, which is a clean water section, which requires federal discharges that require federal permit to meet the state water quality standards. State water quality standards have changed in the last 40 years, which is the last FERC license was issued. And in order to achieve and meet those water quality standards, the dam would have to alter flow. And apparently that would not make it
profitable. And I think the other piece that was the biggest, isn't it? Green River Reservoir. I've been there only once, so I don't really have a heard that it's like one of the most used state parks for.
Right, and it's, that's part of the consideration. If you want to maintain that reservoir, at what flow, and if that, the flow to maintain the park, who should maintain the dam? And so that is part of the conversation.
And then there's our whole conversation earlier about hazard. Maintenance and what level of hazard they brought. Right, any other questions on this one?
The eighth instance of amendment, you will remember in your version of 213 as passed the Senate, there was a study committee on whether to include floodplain as eligible under the use value appraisal program. PVR came in and they said a couple of things. They said that floodplain is already eligible, and depending on where it is and what it's characterized, and they also said that they have so much work right now that they'd rather not do it. And I think that's a fair, I think they talked to you, Senator Watson, didn't they?
I mean, I am not surprised this is out, also a little bit sad, but you know, it's okay. I'm taking on, it's okay.
What is the report?
So the study committee was removed and a new report was added. There was a proposal in House Environment and Energy for A&R and Natural Resources Board to report back to the General Assembly on whether and how to reduce permit fees based on ability to pay or other criteria. There was discussion that some A&R permits can be expensive and potentially are an additional burden that low income to moderate income Vermonters cannot afford when they are looking to purchase or build housing. And the conversation usually revolves around wastewater. When you're building a system, depending on where you are in Addison County, it can be really expensive to build a wastewater treatment system. And the permit can be expensive as well. So that's it is only a report. Ways and Means almost had, a revolt until it was like determined that it was just a report, that it's not authority for A&R or the NRB to reduce their fees. It's just a report.
Commission said they're gonna be looking for people. Next year,
Well, the question often comes up for me. Can the commissioner waive a fee or reduce a fee? And the commissioner doesn't, in my opinion, have that authority right now, waiver or reduction. Could they do it on a case by case enforcement discretion basis? Technically, yes, but if they were gonna do that commonly, it would probably be construed as circumvention of law.
as a practice, as opposed to
Right.
like one unique discretion. Yeah, are you aware of other places where we have income sensitized fees?
I'm not aware of it in Vermont, but I am aware of it in other places and other jurisdictions. It's usually something that state legislatures delegate to or give their local jurisdictions authority to do. Counties or townships or things of that nature. But I'm not really aware of it at state levels, I'm aware of it more at local levels.
Any committee questions on this one? Right?
Mr. Chair, can I just ask?
Yes, I want.
So far, I feel comfortable with everything, maybe something will change, but. Are we hoping to vote on individual sections of this amendment, or are we, because we would need to concur to have it stay alive, essentially, so it would just be, the question for us today is concurred. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think there's a third call, like we can sort of ask them to figure what the term is, the scene or something like that, where it's, they don't change the bill, we can do. And we can say, accept your proposal concurrent, and then we can concur with further proposals, or we could ask for a committee of conference.
If you multiple, you do nothing. And it just
Oh, God.
dies. You can concur. You concur for the proposal of amendment, but then you have to talk to the secretary and your leadership about timing. You can ask for a conference committee, which can often be quicker, but not necessarily, so you have to probably talk to your leadership about that as well. And then it all depends on if you're actually adjourning Friday.
Yeah. Can I just say my safest understanding of our options to make sure that we get this critical piece of legislation through would be to concur, so that's kind of the mindset that I'm going into our discussion.
So I did talk to the pro tem about those timing questions, and I said, great if the committee feels like it's willing to concur with kind of topics and help. Just from a air traffic control point of view, concurrence needs to be bring to the floor. We'll be good to go. On the calendar already. Okay. Okay, Senator John. Was on notice, yes.
Those are kind of those speeches.
We did have one last section. Well, 9.
Well, it's the effective dates. The effective dates were amended to remember those conforming amendments for municipal authority. It was pointed out that they should have that authority until 2028 when A&R takes over permitting, which your version didn't do, and that's my fault, not your fault. And so that change was made. Municipalities that those conforming amendments to that municipal regulation and river corridors does not go until that. Till 2028.
Oh, no, I'm just thumbs up. Great, great. Any questions for council? Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here in the room that familiar faces from the beginning of this journey, which started back on December 5th? When we had that special meeting a long time. Anyone else in the room want to offer comments, questions, etc. Or any takes back from Mr. Carter?
Mr. Chairman, just very briefly, Jared Carpenter with Franklin Committee and Gilson colleagues as well. We are, of course, as you know, we've been involved with this from the beginning. We are to varying degrees comfortable with the changes that the House made. And I can answer we can answer any specific questions you may have. We would just ask that we would please concur when we go forward.
Can we done?
So, Shoreham and Williamstown, which are not, we're at a conformance. We're basically saying there are no consequences to being out of conformance.
Just sure.
Just so.
For sure. And you're not saying that there's no consequence because they're already meeting their wasteload allocations. You're just saying that they don't have to meet their concentration, statutory concentration.
Does the way this work kind of like volume times concentration is going to equal tonnage, and their volume is low enough so that even greater than 28, their tonnage is within the range allowed by the limits.
So I think that's accurate. I mean, I don't know. You all,
Mr. Schulman?
Sure, this is Warren Coleman with NMR Board of Town Forum. Just, we were talking in metric tons, which isn't usually our unit of measurement, but just to hopefully put Senator's mind at ease. The capacity of the facility is 35,000 gallons. It's amongst probably the smallest facilities permitted in the state. Their current flows are about 10,000 gallons per day. They're permitted for 533 pounds of phosphorus. This is giving you orders of magnitude, like multiple orders of magnitude less than most of the facilities that council was describing, and they're currently at about 150 pounds. So they're about at the 20-25% level for flow and phosphorus going to the lake. The facility was built to basically consolidate a number of failing septic systems and straight pipes back in 2000. There's no anticipated major growth that's going to happen in that, in that village that would result in any significant increases in those flows. There also will be a term in the permit that's standard that basically said if you get close to or get to the 80% limit of that facility, then you have to go and investigate additional phosphorus treatment technology. So this is a new concentration limit for their permit term. They've always been in compliance with their permit. This is just a technical requirement. It's not gonna have any additional environmental benefit that would be prohibitively expensive for the town to install that technology. So there's not an environmental reason to have this concentration limit. And it's really, it's a facility that's unique in the Champlain Basin. So it wouldn't affect any other treatment facilities in the Champlain Basin.
Because it's one of the only ones that's a sand filter.
It's the only.
It is the only,
Yes, in the Champlain Basin.
I think Mr. Ray said it was, or you may have said before, it was like a pilot project or something.
They did a pilot, which basically, and this is to the earlier point, they were allowed, because of the technology they installed, they knew they weren't going to. They knew it made more sense fiscally to try and offset some of the phosphorus loading through non-point source measures. Obviously, that area is a very significant agricultural part of the state. So they were authorized by statute to enter into a pilot program, which they've done for 20 years. A lot of those things deal with road maintenance and things of that nature, which now are actually required in standard practice for municipalities. So this concentration limit is a new requirement that came up as a result of their permit being renewed, one of the last ones in the Champlain Basin. And we sat down with A&R, and quite frankly, it didn't make a heck of a lot of sense to make that investment at this small facility, knowing that it was not going to have any environmental benefit or difference to the lake.
Williamstown.
I think Williamstown
I just
was mentioned by council as a order of magnitude that I think Williamstown's like probably three times larger, which was surprising because Williamstown's not exactly a huge community. So I think it was
That's why.
probably not a great example. But like Rutland or another town is, I forget what their pounds, it's literally add a couple of zeros. To get a sense of the magnitude of the other facilities. I think the point is this is amongst the, if not the smallest treatment facility in the Champlain Basin.
Mr. Chair.
Yes,
Just almost on the job.
Commissioner.
Commissioner Batchelder with DC, I just wanted to go on record, first by saying, with great respect and admiration for all the work and trying to get this bill funded, it's huge body of work. We still have a roughly a $36,000 per position poll that we're looking to amend at some point, and you can realize the time for money talk is closed. Our staff is going to be trying to do this work essentially with the money for 11 positions. I realize that 15 are on the table, and we appreciate that. But looking ahead to 2026 is where we're really going to feel these pressures. I just want to go on record by saying first, thank you. Second, we are still underfunded, and we have such a dedicated staff. They will be trying to do 100% of the work that's in front of us with not enough money and not enough. But thank you for everything.
Again, thank you. So 2026, are we talking fiscal year 26 or for calendar year, but that's when you would need more money because.
Oh,
It's or people. And the difference, I think original conversations, I think we used a figure of 150,000 per FTE, that was the rough number, the rough math for position. And so you're saying the number, if we take the allocation and divide by 15.
we get between 112 and 114, and respectfully, some of the dam engineers are a little costlier than that, upwards of 190,000 per FTE. I'm not certain why that is, perhaps Hannah does, but I was cautioned at the 150,000 mark when it's actually a little higher for the dam safety engineers. So to answer your initial question, the fiscal year 2026 when we would be feeling this. Leading up into those time, given my my new understanding for this department, I feel like getting ahead of it as soon as possible is only prudent. And happy to engage at any moment now during the summer, whenever we can to help us along.
Because the budget is closed, I did check in with appropriation for admin. They were advised us all basically keep an eye on how things are going, and before we know it, BAA will be coming up, getting formed. And thank you, Mr. Grady.
The committee.
Before we know it, BAA will be on the agenda and start figuring out before we ever come back in January.
Sure. I was hired for the BAA last year, so this will be my first, but anxious to get everyone again. Thank you all for your time again.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Carpenter.
Yes, no, just, to reiterate what you said, it's, once the dust settles on all this, it is completely the intention of the advocates to work with DEC to come back with the BAA and to secure the necessary positions. We understand sort of all the way through that this was going to be a bit of a ramp up, and as we get into 26, 27, and towards 28, the staff requirements would get broader, that this is a good start. We will need to come back and ask the legislature for probably more funding in one time for here and there, and certainly more base funding for those additional FTEs. So already thinking to the BAA.
Should we need to use her own?
It's just very quickly, Lauren Earl, Vermont Conservation Voters, agree with everything that's been said, and just as someone from Montpelier, a flood ravaged community, a city council here, just like a moment to say thank you, and my community members are so grateful, like being able to come out of sessions with this bill, talking about the critical work to reduce flood risk, and really taking seriously that watershed approach, and knowing that our community can't do it alone, we need to be doing this statewide. Just a moment of gratitude for you all, and just how important this is.
Anyone else? Please, Oaks, I think you're the only one who's. No,
Rather happily.
I just want to be sure that you have a chance before we keep going. All right, so I don't know how the committee is feeling, that I'm basically questioning in front of us is whether we're comfortable with changes and interested in concurring. Yes.
I would move that we concur with the House's proposal of amendment in all counts.
Any further committee discussion? All right.
I do not have a sheet, but also we don't, I don't think we concur. We don't.
Would be wrong, but
There you go, she has one any.
Well, just better. Okay, you can call the roll.
What, so I would be, if there's no version to this, one amendment. Was to propose amendment from the. Oh, look, you're, there we go. Okay. McDonald.
No.
McCormick,
Yes.
Watson,
yes.
White, yes, Chair Bray.
Yes. So, and I'll report on our motion to concur. Okay, thank you, everybody. That completes our scheduled business for the day. I don't know if anything else is gonna 687, an update on progress, I think that they had a talk, the House had a caucus of the whole, I saw a couple of amendments, draft amendments to 687. Circulating by end of day yesterday, I don't know that those have been turned into formal amendments that are, being brought to the floor yet. But the plan is to vote it today and we'll see how soon they push the ball back in our court. That's a committee note, we had talked about dinner, having a committee dinner this evening at 6:30, so based on finance saying we might be running late, I'm pushing 7, but they're calling bottle during the day, like I don't really, no one knows how the finance and schedules know about that, so.
I'm excited, whatever the time is that you poor finance people have to get out, I'll be ready.
We'll be excited to get out by 7 for sure. We feel earnest, there have been some late nights in there, like. Okay, just looking at the. I think we have some other bills coming back, the RVCB's bill, I don't. I need to chase these things down, I've looked, no, that's. 2 days. Well, we have the time. We have battery bill, battery DPR, RVCB's.
305.
258 official mileage bill, I think it's gonna RIP. Well, not in the weeds, actually, but it's gonna rest, I think in that really.
No peace.
No P on that one, well, JPF, here we are, 305, 306, they must be coming to our calendar. The planes are landing. 3 minutes to get post, all right, so thank you everyone for your help, from before 5th and on, and actually. So the other thing I just want to remember to say is, I know that we think like, oh, well, we started working on this on December 5th with the committee, and then when we came back, we know a lot of you are working on this fall, we're not, so thank you for your work and helping us do better work in here. I think, Mayor Watson?
Wondering about our schedule for tomorrow and the next.
So let's tentatively schedule 9. And we'll see what's come in and we can keep moving things.
Schedule what?
9 AM
All my name.
for committee. Probably do something like this, half an hour to an hour.